Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today we'll be doing a review of the 1974 book by K. Jack Bauer, The Mexican War, 1846 to 1848. If you're not familiar with the Mexican War, or as it's more commonly called today, the Mexican-American War, the brief summary is that it was connected to the U.S. annexing the Republic of Texas in 1845, a territory that Mexico had refused to relinquish its claim over, as it was a former Mexican territory that declared independence under coercive circumstances. Their then president, Santa Anna, had been captured and was forced to sign the independence treaty under threat of execution. When the U.S. attempted to negotiate with Mexico for even more territory, including part of modern-day New Mexico and California, a chain reaction of escalations ensued that led to the outbreak of war, which lasted for almost 2 years. While the U.S. Army was small, made mostly of volunteers, and dealt with significant disorganization, the Mexican government was not centralized enough to organize its larger forces, and the U.S. was able to outmaneuver them to win the overall conflict. The war's impact on the U.S.'s expansionist ideals and Mexico's attempts to establish themselves as a sovereign nation was resounding. However, it's become a bit of a forgotten conflict thanks to the Civil War, which took place just over a decade later. This book was written by Carl Jack Bauer, born the 30th of July 1926 in Springfield, Ohio, died the 17th of September 1987 in Troy, New York. Bauer was a naval historian who did his doctoral dissertation on the Mexican-American War, then transitioned to working with the Marine Corps and the Navy, compiling documentation of military operations during World War II. His later years saw him occupying a traditional history professor role at a couple of different private universities, and most of his book writing stems from this period. Among other scholarly works of naval history, Bauer also wrote what is probably the most well-known 20th century biography of Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States. And that biography will be covered on this channel in due time. I actually just got it in the mail yesterday. So, in any case, I was curious to see what Bauer's coverage of the Mexican-American War looked like, since it fits right into his area of expertise. Like I said at the outset, this book was written in 1974, right at the end of the Vietnam War, and that timeline informs Bauer's writing pretty firmly. At times, he explicitly compares the Mexican conflict to the Vietnam one, which I'm sure was a very effective way of helping it feel more modern and the considerations more relatable for that time period. But nowadays, it doesn't move the needle as much, since even Vietnam is almost 50 years gone as I'm recording this. The timing also affects Bauer's somewhat limited attempts at delving into the social significance of this war. When he talks about why the U.S. entered the war, you get the sense that he's a bit defensive in reacting to the critiques of the war and trying to justify the U.S.'s expansion. I do agree with his conclusion that the war was inevitable because of how strong the expansionist mindset of the U.S. was, but I don't necessarily think that exonerates the major players in it, especially since the aftermath left Mexico in a very disorganized and weakened state. Thankfully, perhaps, Bauer doesn't play the commentator role too much. For the most part, this book is a military history, battle by battle, campaign by campaign, day by day. It doesn't ever sit very long with the longer-term significance of one particular event, but rather it moves from point to point at a pretty brisk pace. This would probably be useful for someone with more background context about the war, but someone with very little knowledge is going to have a difficult time following the slew of months and days that are kind of thrown at you. If you get past that, though, the story of the war itself and all of these different campaigns is pretty compelling, and the individuals involved. The disorganized bravado of Zachary Taylor, the political savvy of Santa Anna, who actually comes off very well in this narrative. Bauer defends his sometimes seen as duplicitous actions very capably, and the nerve of Winfield Scott, who led the Mexico City campaign that led to the final peace talks. All of these names and so many others would go on to become major figures in American history before, during, and even after the Civil War. So between that and the general political significance of the U.S. winning the war and formally admitting Texas as a slave state. Bauer's case for this being perhaps the most underreported and underappreciated American war becomes much stronger, very compelling. That being said, this is not a book I would go out of my way to recommend unless you do have knowledge of the era and the background to the war. It's more of an intermediate read than an entry point. I know that I myself will be looking for other more contemporary works that describe this era, so if you have any ideas as far as great books, please throw them down in the comments and I'd be happy to add them to the old list. And that's it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.